In the dim flicker of candlelight, a master stares at a young slave's face, not with hatred, but with a haunted recognition that twists his soul like divine judgment. Why drag this one man from chains into the heart of hell's own parlor? The answer? A sin so profound, it echoes through eternity, begging for redemption that may never come. Tonight, we unearth the terror of unspoken blood. The fog clung to the Virginia lowlands like a shroud, wrapping the Hatcher plantation in a veil of unspoken sins, where the earth itself seemed to hold its breath under the weight of buried wrongs. Oakwood wasn't just land, it was a kingdom forged in fire and flesh, its 2,000 acres a testament to ambition's cruel arithmetic, rows of tobacco plants stretching like supplicants toward a merciless sun, their leaves whispering prayers for rain that rarely came. The main house loomed at the center, a colossal sentinel of whitewashed brick and towering columns, its facade gleaming with false purity under the midday glare. But at night, when the lanterns dimmed, those walls exhaled the ghosts of generations, creaks that sounded like muffled cries, drafts that carried the faint, metallic tang of blood long spilled. This was 1847, a time when the South's prosperity was a gilded mask over moral decay, where men like Edmund Hatcher ruled as petty gods, their authority a fragile illusion upheld by whips and wills. Edmund himself was a relic of that era's contradictions, 58 years etched into a frame once broad and unyielding, now hollowed by some inner rot. His eyes, steel gray and unblinking, held the depth of a bottomless well, places where light dared not venture. Widowed for a decade, he wandered his halls like a specter, his footsteps echoing with the hollow thud of isolation. Prosperity had come to him through inheritance and iron will, but it masked a torment that gnawed at his core, a secret sin that festered like an untended wound. Whispers in the county spoke of his late wife, Elias, a woman of fragile beauty whose death in childbirth left him shattered, her grave on the hill a silent accusation. Was it grief that bent him, or something darker, a biblical curse, perhaps, like Cain's mark, reminding him that no man escapes divine scrutiny? Edmund's faith was a twisted thing, he quoted scripture at Sunday services. Yet his actions reeked of hypocrisy, a soul bartering with heaven while trafficking in hell. In the fields below, life pulsed with a different rhythm, one of relentless toil under the eye of overseers who wielded power like blunt instruments. Elias, at 22, embodied that world's quiet defiance. His body was a map of endurance, lean muscles corded from dawn to dusk labor, skin bronzed and scarred by sun and switch, hands rough as bark from handling the stubborn earth. But his eyes, deep, obsidian pools, betrayed a mind alive with unspoken questions, a spirit unbowed by chains. Orphan young, his mother Nora's death from fever had left him adrift, her final words a haunting benediction: "Child, the Lord sees all, even in the dark. Hold to that light." Nora had been a woman of quiet fire, weaving tales of Old Testament deliverance into lullabies, planting seeds of resilience in her son's heart. Elias clung to those fragments, finding solace in the spirituals hummed under starlit skies, songs that spoke of Jordan's banks and Pharaoh's fall, reminders that bondage was temporal, but the soul eternal. His anchor in this storm was Abner, the elder whose 60 winters had carved wisdom into his weathered face, his skin like ancient parchment inscribed with survival's code. Abner moved with the deliberate grace of one who'd outlasted masters and miseries, his voice a gravelly murmur that carried parables from the good book. "Boy," he'd say, eyes glinting in the firelight of their cramped cabin, "the serpent in the garden didn't shout," he whispered. "Watch for the quiet dangers." Abner had seen it all, uprisings crushed, families torn asunder, souls bartered like chattel. He taught Elias not just the land's secrets, when to plant, how to spot blight, but the subtler arts, reading a white man's mood in the twitch of his jaw, finding God's mercy in the smallest mercies. Their bond was paternal, forged in shared grief. After Nora's passing, Abner had pulled Elias from despair, reminding him that even Job's trials led to restoration. In the quarters, life was a fragile communion, dirt-floored huts clustered like wary sentinels, air thick with wood smoke, stewed greens, and the earthy musk of bodies pushed to breaking. Children's laughter pierced the dusk, a defiant spark against the encroaching dark, while elders like Abner spun yarns that blended folklore with scripture, weaving hope from threads of suffering. Elias navigated this world with guarded poise, his days a cycle of hoe strikes against unyielding soil, the sun a tyrannical overseer scorching his back. He dreamed little of escape, such thoughts were luxuries for the foolhardy, but harbored a quiet faith, a belief that divine justice lurked in the shadows, waiting to balance the scales. The plantation's hierarchy was ironclad, field hands like him at the bottom, house slaves a rung above, privy to the master's intimate cruelties. Ruth, the house matron in her mid-30s, embodied that precarious elevation, her movements fluid and silent, eyes downcast but all-seeing, a woman who'd learned to swallow indignation like bitter medicine. She carried the scars of proximity, whispers of favoritism, the weight of secrets overheard in polished halls. Yet beneath Oakwood's veneer simmered tensions that hinted at deeper fractures. Thomas Hatcher, Edmund's son, was a venomous heir. 30 years of privilege had curdled into casual sadism, his fair skin flushed with perpetual ire, eyes narrowed like a predator's. He oversaw the fields with a whip hand, his cruelty a petty echo of his father's authority, but laced with resentment, perhaps toward the old man's softening edges, or the plantation's mounting debts whispered in town. Thomas viewed slaves as tools, disposable and dehumanized, yet Elias sensed in him a flicker of unease, as if the younger Hatcher glimpsed his own soul's poverty in their enduring spirits. The rupture came on a sweltering afternoon, the sky a vast, unyielding blue dome pressing down like God's indifferent gaze. Cicadas droned a relentless hymn, the air shimmering with heat that blurred the horizon's edge. Elias bent to his task, hoe biting into red clay, mind adrift in rhythmic meditation, pluck, prune, repeat, a trance that dulled the ache in his limbs. Dust rose in fine veils, coating his sweat-slicked skin, the scent of bruised tobacco leaves sharp and acrid. Then, a hush descended, not abrupt but insidious, like poison seeping into a well. Tools stilled, breaths held. Eyes lifted warily toward the field's perimeter, where the manicured path from the house met wild growth. There stood Edmund Hatcher, an apparition in pristine linen, his silhouette stark against the haze. Flanking him, Thomas, face twisted in sullen protest, and Mr. Davies, the foreman, fidgeting like a man sensing storm clouds. Edmund's presence was anomalous. Masters rarely deigned to tread the fields, preferring to command from afar. His gaze swept the rows, deliberate as a reaper's scythe, lingering with an intensity that chilled the blood. The silence thickened, broken only by a crow's distant caw, ominous as a prophet's warning. Elias felt it before he saw, the finger, extended like judgment's arrow, pointing unerringly at him. A frigid wave crashed over Elias, rooting him to the spot. His heart hammered a frantic tattoo, echoing the biblical thunder on Sinai. Why me? The question bloomed in his mind, laced with dread's venom. Davies's voice cracked the tension. Sir, Elias's work been lacking? Edmund's response sliced through a no issue. Elias comes to the house. Now. No elaboration, just decree absolute, irrevocable. Thomas grumbled, a low rumble of thunder. Father, he's unfit for indoors. We have others. Edmund's glare silenced him, a flash of paternal steel revealing fractures in their bond. The field slave's eyes bore into Elias, pity mingled with fear, curiosity's dark undercurrent. To be chosen was no boon, it was exile, a plunge into the master's intimate abyss, where sins festered unseen. Abner's gaze met his, heavy with unspoken counsel, beware the serpent's garden. Elias dropped his hoe, the tool thudding like a fallen idol, and stepped forward, legs leaden, the earth seeming to cling in protest. The walk uphill was a pilgrimage into uncertainty, gravel crunching underfoot, gardens blooming with mocking vibrancy, roses red as spilled blood, hedges trimmed to artificial perfection. Thomas's hostility radiated like heat from coals, a promise of future reckoning. Crossing the threshold, Elias entered another realm, cool shadows swallowing him, air laced with polished wood, aged leather, and the faint, cloying sweetness of decay. The house breathed, floorboards sighing, curtains rustling like spectral whispers. Ruth awaited in the corridor, her expression a mask of guarded empathy, eyes conveying volumes. Tread lightly, walls have ears. Edmund's command echoed, Ruth, settle him near my study. He attends me alone. Her nod was solemn, leading Elias down dim passages where portraits of stern ancestors judged from gilt frames, their eyes following like divine watchers. His quarters, a cramped alcove, Spartan as a monk's cell, cot sagging under thin blankets, chest for meager belongings, a slit window framing a taunting patch of sky. No adornments, just utility's cold embrace. Ruth's whisper cut the air, sleep light. He calls at odd hours. Listen more than speak, survival's in the silence. Elias nodded, throat constricted, the room's confines pressing like a tomb. That night, insomnia gripped him, alien sounds amplified, clock's solemn ticks, winds mournful keen, distant murmurs like prayers unanswered. Through the thin wall, Edmund's study stirred, a sigh heavy with
Regret, glass clinking like chains, silence pregnant with unspoken atonement.
Elias lay rigid, sensing the master's vigil, a shared wakefulness that hinted at bonds forged in sin's forge. Was this divine retribution, pulling him into the vortex of another's guilt? The void of why yawned, a chasm echoing with spiritual unease, promising revelations that could shatter souls. As days unfurled into weeks, Elias adapted to the house's insidious cadence, a ballet of shadows and subservience, where every gesture carried weight. His duties, intimate, invasive. Dawn brought tea preparation, steam curling like incense in the kitchen's glow, porcelain clinking with fragile precision. He laid Edmund's attire, crisp shirts starched to rigidity, boots polished to mirror sheen, each task a ritual of proximity. Meals served in the cavernous dining room, silverware glinting under chandelier light, Edmund's presence a brooding storm cloud. But the study was the sanctum, dusting leather-bound tomes redolent of ink and age, arranging papers yellowed with time, the air thick with pipe smoke and latent confessions. The house revealed its layers, grand parlors with velvet drapes absorbing secrets, attics groaning under forgotten relics, cellars damp and echoing like catacombs. Light played tricks, morning sun slanting through leaded panes, casting cruciform shadows that evoked Calvary's Hill, evening glooms where candles flickered, birthing monstrous silhouettes. Elias moved as a ghost, footsteps muffled on Persian rugs, ears attuned to nuances, Edmund's cough, ragged with unspoken burdens, Thomas's slammed doors, reverberating fury. Ruth became an ally in whispers, sharing scraps, masters changed since the missus passed. Dreams plague him, cries out names in the night. Her words stirred biblical echoes, Pharaoh's troubled sleep, portents of plagues to come. Emotionally, the shift eroded Elias, isolation from the quarters bred loneliness, a spiritual famine where communal songs once nourished. He prayed in snatches, kneeling by his cot, invoking psalms for strength, though I walk through the valley of the shadow. Dread coiled in his gut, why him? Glimpses fueled suspicion, Edmund's lingering stares, not lascivious but paternal, haunted by resemblance? A mirror to youthful folly? Spiritual undertones deepened. Was this redemption's path, forcing the master to confront his sins through Elias's presence? Or divine irony, binding oppressor and oppressed in mutual torment? Conflicts simmered, Thomas's antagonism escalated, snide commands, deliberate obstructions, his eyes blazing with jealousy. Field rat in fine halls, he'd sneer, voice dripping venom. Elias endured, stoicism his shield, but inwardly raged, a tempest of curiosity and fear. Visits to Abner grew rare, stolen moments under moonlight, boy, that's no mercy. Master's got a ghost in him, and you're its vessel. Abner's parables warned of Judas's kiss, betrayal's subtle sting. Months deepened the enigma, Edmund's demeanor softened toward Elias, gentle directives, fleeting touches on the shoulder that spoke of unspoken kinship. One twilight, in the study, Edmund paused over a faded daguerreotype, a woman, ethereal, eyes mirroring Elias's own. She was light, he murmured, voice cracking like dry earth. Elias froze, puzzle pieces aligning, could it be? Blood ties, concealed in shame? The revelation hovered, a spiritual thunderhead, promising storm or salvation, yet the house's chill persisted, nights brought apparitions, whispers in walls, shadows shifting unnaturally, as if ancestral sins demanded witness. Elias pondered justice's scales, biblical tales of hidden offspring, like Abraham's cast-aside sons, echoing here in flesh. Guilt's legacy haunted Edmund, his prosperity a hollow throne, divine retribution lurking in Elias's unwitting role. As seasons turned, Elias transformed, not broken, but forged anew, his spirit a beacon amid darkness. The unspoken reason pulsed like a heartbeat, drawing him deeper into the moral maze, where redemption and ruin danced in eternal tension. What horror birthed this choice? The answer, buried in blood and Bible, awaited its unearthly reveal. The corridors of Oakwood Plantation stretched like veins through a living corpse, pulsing with the suppressed rhythms of a household steeped in deception. In 1847 Virginia, where the humid air carried the perpetual scent of tobacco fields mingling with the faint rot of unacknowledged sins, the main house stood as a monument to hypocrisy, a grand edifice of white brick and towering columns that masked the moral decay within. Sunlight filtered through tall sash windows and fractured beams, casting elongated shadows that twisted across polished oak floors like fingers of accusation. The air inside was a tapestry of odors, the sweet, cloying decay of wilted magnolias in crystal vases, the sharp bite of lemon oil rubbed into antique furniture, the musty whisper of leather-bound volumes gathering dust in the library's dim recesses. And underlying it all, the pervasive haze of Edmund Hatcher's pipe tobacco, a smoky veil that clung to curtains and upholstery, symbolizing the master's lingering presence, a man whose soul seemed eternally wreathed in the fumes of his own guilt. Elias, now entrenched in this gilded prison, navigated its emotional minefield with the wariness of a soul sensing divine scrutiny. His days unfolded in a ritual of subservience, rising before dawn to the faint chime of a distant grandfather clock, its ticks echoing like the inexorable march toward Judgment Day. He prepared Edmund's morning ablutions, steaming water in a porcelain basin, the metallic tang of shaving soap lathering under a straight razor's gleam, each act a brush with the intimate vulnerabilities of his oppressor. The study became his primary domain, a sanctum heavy with symbolism, walls lined with shelves of forgotten tomes, their spines cracked like the facade of Edmund's piety, a massive mahogany desk scarred by years of quill scratches, as if bearing witness to confessions never voiced. Here, Elias dusted with feather-light touches, feeling the grain of wood under his calloused palms, each swipe uncovering layers of dust that mirrored the accumulated grime on the master's conscience. The Hatcher family emerged as archetypes in a biblical drama of sin and retribution. Clara Hatcher, at 24, moved through the house like a melancholic apparition, her porcelain skin pale against the vibrant silks of her gowns, which rustled softly like autumn leaves underfoot. Her beauty was ethereal, tinged with a sorrow that evoked the weeping women at the foot of the cross, eyes distant, often fixed on some invisible horizon through lace-curtained windows. Educated beyond the norms of her era, she clutched novels by Austen or the Brontes, pages turning idly as if seeking escape from her own narrative of entrapment. Elias caught her in quiet moments, seated in the parlor, sunlight haloing her auburn hair, a faint sigh escaping her lips like a prayer for deliverance. Her nods to him were rare gifts, subtle inclines of the head, accompanied by eyes brimming with pity, as if she recognized in his bondage a reflection of her own spiritual confinement, bound by societal chains and familial secrets. Was she, too, sensing the divine imbalance, the scales of justice tipping under the weight of inherited wrongs? In stark contrast, Thomas Hatcher embodied the serpent's cunning, his 30 years hardening into a vessel of petty malice. His fair complexion flushed easily with rage, eyes narrowed to slits that gleamed with calculation, much like Cain's envious glare before the fatal blow. He prowled the halls with heavy boots thudding on rugs, his presence a storm cloud that darkened rooms. Toward Elias, his resentment was a sharpened blade, contrived faults barked in clipped tones, polish those boots again, boy, or feel the switch, commands laced with venom, his breath hot and sour with unspoken accusations. Thomas viewed Elias not merely as chattel but as an usurper, a symbol of paternal favoritism that threatened his inheritance. In the dining room, under the crystal chandelier's judgmental sparkle, Thomas's stares bored into Elias as he served, promising a reckoning that echoed Old Testament vendettas, brother against brother, legitimate heir against the hidden bastard. Mrs. Dorothea Price, the housekeeper, loomed as a guardian of thresholds, her late 50s frame rigid in starched aprons that whispered with each step, evoking the rustle of angelic wings or perhaps the chains of the damned. Her face was a etched parchment of lines, eyes sharp as thorns, holding the wisdom of one who'd witnessed generations of Hatchers rise and fall. She dispensed orders with clipped precision, wiped the banisters thrice, Elias, dust clings like sin. Yet beneath her austerity flickered a maternal flicker, brief touches on his arm, warnings veiled in ambiguity, mind the locked drawers, boy, some truths are graves best left unsealed. Elias sensed her as a keeper of the flame, privy to the plantation's darkest confessions, her silence a complicit vow that bound her soul in moral ambiguity. Was she complicit in divine eyes, hoarding knowledge like the rich man ignoring Lazarus at his gate? At the epicenter brooded Edmund Hatcher, a figure of tragic grandeur, his 58 years carving gaunt hollows in cheeks once full, his steel-gray eyes shadowed by brows furrowed in perpetual torment. His routines were clockwork rituals of isolation, mornings in the study, quill-scratching ledgers with the fervor of one tallying sins for judgment, evenings retreating behind the oak door's resolute click, a barrier between worldly facade and private purgatory. From beyond, Elias heard the symphony of despair, glass clinking against decanter, amber liquid sloshing like tears unshed, heavy sighs escaping. Like souls fleeing the body. Above the mantel hung the portrait, a woman of luminous grace, her eyes piercing with otherworldly depth, following Elias as he worked. Dressed in ethereal white, she evoked Mary Magdalene, redeemed yet forever marked by past transgressions. Edmund's gazes upon it were raw exposures, face softening to vulnerability, hands trembling as if reaching for absolution denied.
Who was she? A lost love, or a spectral stand-in for the true betrayal?
Most chilling were Edmund's pauses mid-command, his gaze locking onto Elias with an intensity that transcended master-slave dynamics, a searching hunger, as if peering into a mirror of his younger self, or seeking echoes of a forbidden union. Elias felt it like divine interrogation, heart racing, skin prickling under that scrutiny, a silent accusation of shared blood. He schooled his features to impassivity, eyes averted like Peter's denial, inwardly churning with dread and curiosity. This was no mere favoritism, it was a twisted atonement, pulling the fruit of sin into proximity, forcing the sinner to confront his legacy. Elias's mind, sharp as a biblical scribe's, catalogued anomalies, Clara's lingering glances at the portrait, heavy with unspoken kinship, Thomas's escalating barbs, laced with jealousy that hinted at half-known truths, Mrs. Price's cryptic nods, as if acknowledging a ghost among them.
The house itself seemed complicit, a living entity, its creaks like muffled judgments, drafts whispering scriptures of retribution. The sins of the fathers shall be visited upon the children. On a rare Sunday respite, Elias stole to the quarters, the path downhill a descent from opulence to raw humanity. Wood smoke curled invitingly, mingling with earth and sweat, a balm against the house's perfumed artifice. Abner sat whittling, knife flashing in sunlight, carving wood into shapes that evoked crucifixes or idols. Elias sank beside him, the ground cool and grounding. Abner sensed the burden. Chosen one, eh?
That house devours its own. His eyes, ancient pools of wisdom, met Elias's.
Master's ghosts walk with you now. Secrets ain't chains, they're nooses.
The words landed like prophetic thunder, evoking Job's trials or David's hidden sins.
Elias returned uphill, Abner's counsel a spiritual armor, yet the house's silence now roared, a conspiracy of the damned.
The pivot arrived on an innocuous Tuesday, the sky overcast with pregnant clouds, mirroring Elias's foreboding.
Edmund departed for town, horse hooves clattering on gravel like fleeing footsteps. The house exhaled, tensions easing in his absence. Elias entered the study, dust motes dancing in slanted light like ethereal witnesses. Wiping the desk, his cloth caught, a drawer ajar, lock forgotten in haste. Temptation surged, a serpent's whisper, seek and ye shall find. Heart thundering like apocalyptic drums, he glanced to the empty hall, shadows lurking like guardian angels or demons. With reverent dread, he eased it open. Within, a bundle of letters, bound in faded blue ribbon, parchment yellowed like ancient scrolls. No ledgers, these were intimate missives, edges softened by reverent handling. Elias untied with trembling fingers, script elegant and faded, dates from 1825 onward, addressed, My dearest Edmund, signed N. A chill gripped him, N for Nora, his mother's initial, etched in memory like a sacred rune. He read, words searing, tales of forbidden passion, a child conceived in shadows, promises of protection shattered by cowardice. One letter burned brightest, the child grows within me, a testament to our folly. Protect him, for the part of you that lives in him. The implications crashed like divine lightning. Elias, the secret son, fruit of sin between master and slave. The room spun, the portrait's eyes now accusatory, revealing resemblances, jawline strength, eyes depth linking Nora to this spectral woman, perhaps a proxy for lost love. Elias refold, ribbon retied. Drawer sealed, but the knowledge was indelible. That night, cot-bound, moonlight sliced like a blade, house sounds conspiring, creaks as confessions, winds as wails. He was no mere servant, he was Edmund's hidden heir, a living emblem of betrayal, drawn close in twisted redemption. Divine justice loomed. Would this revelation bring salvation or cataclysm? The stone of truth settled, refracting all through guilt's prism. Edmund's stairs? Paternal hauntings, echoes of Nora's face in his son's. The house? A sepulchre of lies, silence a complicit shroud. Elias sought confirmations, Ruth's whispers in the pantry's dim glow. Nora wasn't always Fields, she sewed in the house, caught the master's eye. Her words, veiled as parables, confirmed the unholy union. Clara's pity deepened to sisterly sorrow, Thomas's hate to fraternal rivalry. Mrs. Price's warnings now prophetic, some blood runs thicker than chains. Elias pondered spiritually, was he able to Thomas's Cain? Or a Joseph, sold into bondage yet destined for revelation? Guilt's legacy poisoned Oakwood, debts mounting like plagues, fields blighted as if cursed. Edmund's pipe smoke now reeked of brimstone, his sighs pleas for mercy denied. Elias felt divine purpose, witness to sin, vessel for justice. Yet dread-coiled exposure could shatter all, invoking retribution's storm. Interactions shifted, Edmund's commands softer, laced with unspoken pleas, Thomas's cruelties sharper, sensing the threat. Clara offered fleeting smiles, eyes hinting at shared blood's bond. Ruth became confessor, your mama prayed for you, child, Lord's watching. Abner's visits, rare, reinforced, you're the reckoning, boy. Sins don't stay buried.
As autumn leaves fell like judgments, Elias embodied the haunting, a ghost in flesh, forcing confrontation.
The reason unwritten? Shame's decree, but divine ledgers record all. Redemption whispered, could acknowledgement heal? Or would sin's fruit rot the tree?
The house, once oppressive, now pulsed with impending apocalypse, Elias at its core, a spiritual fulcrum tipping toward eternal balance. The hush of Oakwood had evolved from mere quiet to a living, predatory thing by the late 1840s and into the 1850s, a decade when Virginia's laws tightened like iron bands around any whisper of emancipation or racial blurring. Manumission, once a master's whim under the 1782 Act, now faced mounting restrictions. Post-1830s fears of revolt and abolitionist fervor made freeing slaves risky, often requiring legislative approval or exile beyond state lines. Mixed-race children born of enslaved mothers inherited bondage, their status a legal echo of maternal chains, denying paternal recognition. In this era, secrets like Elias's were not anomalies but calculated cruelties, buried to preserve the fragile myth of white purity and divine hierarchy. The house itself seemed to absorb this moral rot, walls yellowing under tobacco haze, floorboards groaning as if protesting the weight of concealed sins, air heavy with the metallic bite of polished silver and the faint, acrid undertone of decay from hidden corners. Ruth's whispers in the pantry's dim glow carried the gravity of ancient testimony. She spoke in fragments, eyes darting to doorways as if the very walls listened. Nora, she wasn't always out there under the sun, Ruth murmured one sweltering afternoon, hands busy folding linens that smelled of lye and starch. Came inside young, sewing fine things for the missus that was. Master took notice, her stitches, her quiet way. Lines blurred, child.
Dangerous lines.
Her voice dropped lower, evoking the biblical caution against forbidden unions. Ruth had witnessed or inherited the tale from elders who'd seen Nora's belly swell in secrecy, the master's fondness turning possessive, then distant once the child arrived.
No direct accusation, just knowing glances, sudden pauses that screamed volumes.
Ruth's sympathy for Elias deepened to a maternal ache. She slipped extra bread into his pockets, her touch lingering like a blessing against impending storm.
Mrs. Dorothea Price, the housekeeper whose starched aprons rustled like judgment's wings, bore the heaviest yoke.
Decades in service had etched her face into a mask of controlled sorrow, but now cracks appeared, sighs deeper when Edmund withdrew into his study, eyes lingering on Elias with flickers of guilt, as if seeing the ghost of Nora in his features. She knew had perhaps helped conceal the pregnancy, tended the birth in shadowed rooms, sworn oaths of silence. Her silences were armor, forged in a house where truth could unravel empires. When Thomas raged, she'd avert her gaze, lips pressed thin, the burden of complicity etching deeper lines around her mouth. Elias sensed her unraveling, hands trembling over silver trays, movements less precise, eyes haunted by visions of divine reckoning for those who hoard others' sins. Even Dr. Nathaniel Graves, the family physician whose visits grew frequent as Edmund's health frayed, carried fragments of the secret. A man of science and southern discretion, he exchanged loaded glances with Edmund, brief, wordless understandings that bypassed speech. When an old field hand once uttered Nora's name in passing, Graves' jaw tightened, a flicker of discomfort betraying knowledge beyond medicine. His bag held remedies for coughs and fevers, but his mind held cures for deeper wounds, the psychological torment of a household poisoned by unacknowledged blood.
Graves knew the risks, laws forbade easy manumission, and revelation could invite scandal, legal peril, even violence. Thomas's malice now crystallized into targeted venom.
His resentment wasn't casual cruelty but fraternal rage. Elias, the living proof of paternal transgression, threatened the purity of the Hatcher line.
Thomas saw in Elias not just a slave but a mirror to his own insecurity, legitimacy tainted by shadow blood.
Accusations flew, missing items blamed on Elias, impossible tasks assigned then condemned. Insolent field trash, Thomas snarled in the dining room, voice echoing under chandelier light that cast cruciform shadows.
Back to the dirt where you belong.
Edmund's weary dismissals only fueled the fire, his protection a silent affirmation that stoked Thomas's fury like bellows on coals.
Clara's quiet sadness took on poignant depth.
Her nods, once mere pity, now felt like veiled kinship, sisterly sorrow for a brother denied. Educated and introspective, she rebelled subtly against her cage, yet the family's secret imprisoned her too. Her eyes, often red-rimmed, held unspoken grief for a mother lost to shame, a half-brother bound in silence.
She offered fleeting comforts, a book left open to psalms of deliverance, a whispered "be strong" in passing corridors. The knowledge crushed Elias like a millstone. Grief for Nora surged anew, her stories of resilience now laced with betrayal's sting.
Anger at Edmund burned cold, the man who'd sired him yet denied him name and freedom.
Injustice seared his soul, fear for his future a constant chill.
He was no longer Elias of the fields, he was the embodiment of sin, a walking accusation in a house built on denial. One twilight, as crimson bled into indigo across the Virginia sky, Edmund summoned Elias to the study. Whiskey fumes mingled with pipe smoke, fire crackling like accusations. Edmund slumped in his high-backed chair, glass trembling, gaze fixed on flames as if seeking absolution there. Elias stood rigid, heart thundering like judgment drums.
Edmund spoke obliquely, voice raspy, "This land, its legacy, Elias. Blood and name. What a man owes his blood." Pauses heavy, ice clinking like chains.
He gestured to ledgers, books, symbols of order preserved at soul's cost. No son, no father, just veiled acknowledgement, obligations to past and future, order maintained at all costs.
Edmund justified, not confessed, sought understanding for choices that buried truth to safeguard empire.
Elias absorbed it silently, a mirror reflecting nothing back, yet everything changed. The door closed softly behind him, but silence now bound them in suffocating intimacy, Elias dwelling in Edmund's conscience, a ghost refusing burial. The unspoken truce ignited dangers.
Thomas escalated, bolder lies, crueler torments, aim clear, expel the threat. Edmund's sighs and protections only inflamed him.
The house became a pressure vessel, cracks widening. Dr. Graves' visits intensified, Edmund's cough deepened, framed bond his penance. Elias, fetching water, overheard through a cracked door, Graves' urgent plea, unnatural, dangerous.
"You can't keep him indefinitely." Edmund's growl, "He stays. He's mine." Graves warned of festering secrets poisoning all.
Elias retreated, pitcher heavy, confirmation bitter, Edmund's choice, keep close, never free, never acknowledge, was twisted possession, penance without redemption.
Mrs. Price unraveled visibly, mistakes mounting, eyes frantic.
In the pantry one afternoon, she whispered to Elias, "It's sick, the house."
Master losing grip.
Veiled allusions to Nora, letters, poisoned decisions. Elias offered silent strength, but futility loomed.
A week later, she died in her bed, heart ailment, Graves declared.
Elias knew better, hushed talks between Edmund and Thomas, fear's weight stopping her heart.
Silenced, not by blade but terror.
Her death screamed, knowledge was lethal, proximity deadly. Clara sought him in the moonlit garden, voice trembling, careful, Elias.
Father protects his name at any cost. Thomas, a viper. Mrs. Price, no accident. Her grip fierce, for Nora's sake. Fear genuine, sisterly.
Elias understood, he carried a bomb, ticking in Virginia's brutal order, laws chaining truth, society demanding silence. The secret demanded blood. Elias moved isolated, house slaves averting eyes, whispers hushed. He pondered spiritually, divine justice delayed, yet inevitable, like Pharaoh's plagues or David's reckoning.
Was he the instrument?
The house, once grand, now a sepulchre, columns cracked, air thick with ghosts.
Redemption flickered distant, retribution neared.
Elias, heart of the storm, waited for the scales to tip, knowing truth's revelation could shatter Oakwood or set souls free in fire. By the waning years of the 1850s, Oakwood Plantation had become a mausoleum of deferred reckonings, its once vibrant fields overgrown with neglect, tobacco leaves wilting under an indifferent sun that seemed to mirror the moral eclipse within its walls. Virginia's laws had long since tightened around manumission like a noose. The 1782 Act once allowed masters to free slaves at will, but post-1806 restrictions demanded freed people leave the state within a year, lest they forfeit liberty and face re-enslavement. For mixed-race children of enslaved mothers, status followed the womb, bondage inherited, paternity irrelevant in law's cold calculus. Hidden bloodlines were not rarities but necessities of survival, buried to preserve fragile hierarchies of race and power. In this world, truth was a weapon too dangerous to wield openly, silence, a shield forged in fear and shame. Elias moved through the house like a shadow given form, marked indelibly by knowledge that set him apart. No longer merely chosen, he was the living embodiment of Edmund's torment, a mirror reflecting sins the master could neither face nor flee. His duties continued, polishing the study's brass until it gleamed like false virtue, dusting shelves where ledgers recorded prosperity built on stolen lives, arranging the portrait above the mantel so the woman's luminous eyes seemed to follow him with quiet accusation. The air in the study hung thick, pipe tobacco's acrid bite mingling with whiskey's sour breath, old paper's musty decay, and the faint metallic tang of secrets long interred. One stifling afternoon, sunlight slanting through tall windows in dusty shafts like divine probes, Elias knelt to clean beneath the heavy mahogany desk. His cloth snagged on a loose floorboard, subtle discoloration, a hairline gap betraying time's erosion. Heart pounding with the rhythm of forbidden discovery, he traced the edges, fingers calloused from years of labor now trembling with anticipation. With surgical care, he pried it free, the wood groaning softly like a confession long suppressed. Beneath lay oilcloth, wrapped tight against damp and time. Elias unfolded it reverently, parchment crackling like dry leaves underfoot. A deed of manumission, dated 1835, Elias 10 years old, still a boy in the quarters dreaming of his mother's lullabies. The script, elegant yet hesitant, named him Elias, son of Nora, and of Edmund Hatcher. Acknowledgement stark on the page, blood recognized, freedom granted, lineage affirmed. Yet unsigned. Unfiled. Never executed. Edmund had drafted it, ink drying on promises he could not fulfill. He had held the document, weighed conscience against consequence, scandal that would shatter reputation, legal perils, an estate wary of free black presence, social ruin amid peers who guarded racial purity like sacred doctrine. Pride, shame, fear, the unholy trinity, had prevailed. Unable to destroy the truth outright, he buried it here, a silent agony preserved beneath his feet, testament to a soul divided between flicker of redemption and iron grip of sin. Elias held the paper, its weight immense as ancestral chains. Memories flooded, Nora's gentle hands braiding his hair, her whispered prayers for deliverance echoing psalms of Exodus, 22 years of toil under sun and whip, defined by a secret that had shadowed every breath. Grief crashed like waves, for a mother denied justice, for a life stolen by cowardice. Anger burned cold, Edmund could have signed, could have freed, could have honored the bond blood demanded. Instead, he chose facade over fatherhood, order over mercy, echoing Pharaoh's hardened heart before plagues descended. The temptation surged, take it, expose all, watch Oakwood crumble under truth's avalanche. But reality intruded like a whip's crack. In Virginia's brutal order, revelation invited destruction, not liberation. Courts would dismiss a black man's claim against white authority, mobs would enforce silence with rope and fire. Clara's fragile world would shatter, Thomas's rage would ignite vengeance. Freedom on paper meant peril in flesh, runaway status, hunted life, no recourse under laws that deemed him property still. Elias understood divine irony, truth withheld not from fear alone, but profound wisdom of the oppressed. He refolded the deed, rewrapped it in oilcloth, pressed the board back seamless, no trace of disturbance. He rose, dust settling like forgotten grace, carrying now not another's burden, but his own chosen silence. A shield, not a sword, knowledge as armor in a war yet to come. The years blurred into storm clouds gathering over a fractured nation. 1861 dawned ominous, distant thunder of secession rolling southward. Fort Sumter's fall ignited the Civil War, Virginia's heartland a battlefield where armies trampled fields once tilled by enslaved hands. Oakwood fractured, labor fled north or conscripted Confederate, crops failed under neglect, debts mounted like accusations. Thomas, fueled by Southern zeal and personal demons, enlisted, swaggering off in gray, leaving debts and hatred behind. His absence exhaled relief through the house, yet deepened Edmund's isolation. Clara transformed. Her passive sorrow hardened into clandestine resolve. By lamplight, she corresponded with northern abolitionists, harbored fugitives in hidden rooms, guided escapees along shadowed paths to freedom. Elias observed her furtive movements, supplies slipped into satchels, hushed words in moonlit gardens, and offered silent alliance. Mutual respect bloomed, shared moral revulsion at the rot around them, unspoken kinship in blood and burden. He never betrayed her, his silence became protection. Edmund withered. Age and war accelerated decay, frame gaunt, hands trembling, eyes clouded with despair. He clung to Elias desperately, summoning him constantly, presence a lifeline amid crumbling empire. Elias was no longer servant or secret, he was witness, confessor, the last tether to a man unraveling thread by thread. One bleak evening in 1864, cannon echoes rumbling like God's judgment across the horizon, Edmund called Elias to the study. Candlelight sputtered, shadows writhing like tormented souls. Edmund slumped, breath ragged, whiskey glass shaking. "The war takes everything," he rasped. "My father, ashamed of what I'd become." Words tumbled fragmented, veiled allusions to Nora, beautiful, fierce, like you, broken promises, fear of scandal, legacy preserved at soul's cost. No apology, no direct confession, just desperate justification, a final attempt to bridge the chasm. Then, in despair's slip, "Nora, my Nora." Eyes widening in horror, he halted, tear tracing down weathered cheek. Elias stood sentinel, silent. Not from emptiness, but recognition, spoken truth here would ignite destruction, not healing. Edmund's torment was divine retribution, self-inflicted, eternal. Elias bore witness to collapse, pride's embers dying, legacy crumbling. The master's soul, poisoned by unconfessed sin, paid the ultimate price. War ended April 1865, Lee's surrender a weary exhale. Emancipation Proclamation, enforced at last in Virginia's heartland, shattered chains. For Elias, no explosion of joy, just profound shift, invisible yoke lifted. Late April morning, sky clear as promised deliverance, he walked away from Oakwood. Took nothing, no letters, no deed, no relics of suffocating intimacy. Left them buried, truths interred with their keeper. Clothed in worn shirt, callous as his only inheritance, soul etched with indelible knowledge, he strode toward uncertainty, a free man owning his silence. Edmund died 6 weeks later, lungs ravaged by drink and despair, official cause ailment, true cause unconfessed sin's crushing spirit. House exhaled mournfully, study cleared, drawer found empty, secrets vanished, perhaps claimed by hands that valued their weight. Clara sold remnants, severed ties, vanished north, rebellion fulfilled in freedom. Thomas returned broken, haunted, plantation sold piecemeal, grandeur erased. The reason Edmund chose Elias, blood's pull, guilt's torment, twisted atonement, never written. Died with him, too shameful for records, too profound for ink. Or perhaps it walked free that April day, carried in Elias's heart, truth's power not in revelation, but enduring, chilling silence. Oakwood crumbled slowly, monument to unspoken choices, haunting question eternal, why? What shadows linger in your own history? Share thoughts below. If chills remain, like, subscribe, share, more dark tales await.